welcome once again to our show, and this is Frank Avila, your host. My co-host is Don Richie. Thank you for being my co-host.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Frank.
And our guest is the candidate for Alderman in the 10th Ward of the City of Chicago, Rich Martinez.
Hey, Frank, how are you?
Rich, thank you for being on our show.
Thanks for having me.
And we invite all candidates and incumbents for alderman to be on our show. We're going to ask you any questions, so you have to be prepared. But any alderman and any candidate in the City of Chicago, and also suburbs, if there's time in the later April elections also, can be on this TV show. And you can just contact the Illinois Committee for Honest Government and the information that's online for these shows. And you can see this show also on YouTube, as well as on channel 19 or 21, Cable Access Network TV. And these shows are in honor of Randall Sherman. All the 2015 shows are in honor of Randall Sherman of blessed memory, who was the founder of our organization and brought us into cable television. So, Rich, first, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Sure. Well, once again, my name is Rich Martinez. I'm candidate for alderman in the 10th Ward. Grew up on the southeast side, lifelong resident, raised in the South Chicago neighborhood. Come from a steelworkers family. My great-grandfather retired from Wisconsin Steel. My grandfather retired from U.S. Steel Southworks. My wife, Sandy, and I have 5 children that we're raising on the east side. My mom lives with us, and my almost 90-year-old grandfather, who's a World War II veteran, also resides with us on the east side. I'm a graduate of Loyola University, where I have a double major, Bachelor of Science degree in both political science and criminal justice. And for the last almost 20 years, I've worked in government. I actually got my start in the Chicago City Council. Not long after college, I was an aldermanic aide to former 10th Ward Alderman John Buchanan. I actually have state legislative experience as well. And for the last 15 years, I've been monitoring capital construction contracts for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. I've actually had the opportunity to monitor over $500 million in capital construction contracts over the last 15 years for compliance. And I'm active in the community, a former president of the Southeast Lions Club. I'm actually one of the co-founders of the South Chicago Consortium, which brought in hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding for after-school programs into the South Chicago neighborhood. I've served on the local school council at George Washington High School. I've been an activist on issues of environmental justice. I had the opportunity to work against the Leucadia coal gasification plant, which they tried to build across the street from Washington High School. And I've also been active in the ban pet coke movement on the southeast side. So those are just some of the things that I've been a part of.
Sounds like you've been involved in a couple things.
Yeah, just a few, yes.
Just a few.
Mm-hmm.
So where is the 10th Ward?
Sure. So the 10th Ward is in the far southeastern corner of the city of Chicago. So if you're to look at a map, 83rd Street on the north, 138th Street, which is the city limits on the south, the Indiana border on the east, and Torrance Avenue, vaguely, it zigzags, but Torrance Avenue would be the western boundary.
So your western boundary is the 9th Ward, is that correct?
Actually, it would be the 7th, kind of border the 7th Ward. And
well, 7th is on your north also, isn't it?
Yeah, but also on the west. So
okay.
7, 8, and 9 are obviously nearby us, but it would be the neighborhoods of Bush in South Chicago, the east side, Hegewisch, South Deering, Jeffrey Manor, and Vets Park and Slag Valley as well.
Okay. That includes Hegewisch and South Chicago as big neighborhoods, and
yes.
The southeast side.
And the east side, which is where I live, yes.
Okay.
The east side would be the largest neighborhood.
And you're a lakefront community.
And we're on the lakefront, and we're the only ward in the city that has a state park.
And you also have one of the few wards in the city that has trailer homes.
Yes, we do have a trailer home.
A mutual friend who lives there, and
yes.
a brother of a mutual friend,
yes.
and a friend in itself.
Yes.
So now the 10th Ward at one time was kind of an example of America in the 50s and the 60s and post-World War II American might. The steel industry,
yes.
I think even some auto components. Yeah. You've had the Torrance Avenue
Ford
plant. It's been there, I think, for like 100 years,
yes.
If I'm not mistaken. Now making the Ford Explorer
Correct.
And the Ford Taurus and one of the Lincoln cars. And I think they even make a police car down there, too.
Yeah, I believe so.
So at least 2 or 3, if not 4 vehicles are made there, and different vehicles since at least the 1920s, I think. So you had Bethlehem Steel, or from the northwest corner of Indiana to the 10th Ward
Mm-hmm.
was a huge crescent of industrial might.
Yes.
Big smokestacks and jobs and jobs.
50, yeah,
you know.
50,000 jobs at one time.
Right, 50,000 jobs. And so movies like The Deer Hunter, you see the guys working at the steel mills, or, you know, the old Union movies, and the big smokestacks. You still can see some of them today.
Yes.
And big, huge buildings that you see when you come down the expressway if you go to Indiana.
Yes.
And then it all started to die in the late 70s and early 80s.
Correct.
And it's not quite dead, but it's a shadow of its former self.
Well, the steel industry in the city and in the 10th Ward is dead. You still have steel industry in northwestern Indiana with the U.S. Steel plant in Gary, but the steel industry is dead in the 10th Ward.
You do have some collateral industries that are still present, though, in the
Yeah.
10th Ward.
Yes.
You still have a small auto industry
Yes.
in the 10th Ward, which we talked about.
Yes.
The Ford plant. And there's been some auto component industries.
There's a Ford supplier park that was built.
One of them closed down, though, unfortunately. I know one of the smaller component parks.
Okay, but there are some that are now. So
And there's some other uses that the steel plants have been using.
not exactly. No.
No, okay.
No. Pretty much it's all done
It's
with.
dead. Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the 10th Ward has now become the dumping ground for BP, specifically with pet coke, and also with all the asphalt production has been outsourced to a company called AOS.
Well,
in
let's
the 10th
talk
Ward.
about pet coke in a second, which is a very important issue. But so it went from an economically vibrant area
Yes.
where immigrants from Croatia, Serbia, Poland, Mexico,
Yes.
a lot of big Mexican community in South Chicago, one of the oldest in the Midwest, one of the oldest in
Yes.
Chicago, came from. And you had a job where you could pay for a mortgage, put your kids through even Catholic school, maybe even a summer home, 2 cars, nice car, and then it all ended.
Yes.
And it's been gone for 20 years or more.
Yeah, we're approaching close to 40 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, how can you bring back some economic development to the 10th Ward, which was devastated by the international economy and jobs moving overseas and the changes in the steel market and other industries?
Sure. Well, the first thing that we've been doing, or we're trying to do in the 10th Ward, is a paradigm shift as far as the old, dirty, polluting industry of the past, and look towards something that is greener and cleaner, looking at industry and manufacturing and supply work and development that doesn't harm our health and doesn't harm the land. The southeast side of the 10th Ward have some of the highest rates of heart disease, asthma, and cancer. Now, the steel industry has been dead for 30 years, so we have to look at the existing industry in the area, and it's about trying to create a new future, a new 10th Ward, where we can bring in. They're looking at $39 trillion in energy projects over the next 30 years in the U.S. that are non-fossil fuel. Well, it's my job as an alderman to try to bring in those resources and bring in a different type of industry and development to our community to put people to work, good-paying union jobs. I happen to be a member of the Blue-Green Alliance, which brings environmentalists and members of the steelworkers union and other organized labor together to look at new type of development, new type of industry, new type of jobs that are good paying, but once again do not harm the health of the people and the land. And we're still dealing with some dirty industry in the 10th Ward. I mentioned Leucadia. We talked about Leucadia, for example, which is a coal gasification plant they wanted to build right across the street from Washington High School on the old LTV steel property. And we opposed that. And all the elected officials, including the incumbent alderman in the 10th Ward, said, it's a done deal. You can't do nothing about it. But the community galvanized, the community worked together, and they fought to protect our community, and we were successful. We were able to defeat that project not once but twice. And what come out of that project was the development of the Environmental Justice Alliance of Greater Southeast Chicago, which I'm one of the co-founders of. And it was a group of different organizations that wanted to come together out of the Leucadia fight, to look at different types of industry and protecting our ward and the land and the health of the people. And one of the things that we worked on that come out of that was the establishment of the environmental justice principles for all future economic development on the southeast side. So looking at ways to bring in clean and green industry, looking at those firms that come into the 10th Ward, establishing community benefits agreements, things of that nature that are going to be a benefit to the community. They're going to bless the community. But primarily looking at putting a stop to the health issues that exist in our community. And so these are some of the things that come out of that fight with Leucadia. After that, then we started to deal with pet coke after the front page Tribune article last year by Michael Hawthorne, which showed the 60 and 70 foot high piles of pet coke, which is short for petroleum coke. And it's very fine, black dust, if you will. And it's been shown to create respiratory issues. It's all over our homes. It's all over the community. Last year they brought in 1 million tons of pet coke into the east side. They actually have a permit that would allow them to bring it up to 11 million tons of pet coke. And not only the health issues, but it also has a detrimental effect to our property values. So it's about a shift. It's about a paradigm shift as to, we can say, well, it's always been a dirty, polluted, industrial community and live in that past. But those 50,000 jobs are gone. Those companies that are there now, such as the KCBX, for example, that's owned by the Koch brothers, or Beamster Bor, or AOS, there's no 50,000 jobs. Many of these plants only have 40 employees.
They're not the same good paying jobs that you had in years past.
No, and it's also the amount. So we're dealing with 40 employees at one plant and another 40 at another. And the question is that we're never able to get a clear answer on how many 10th warders work in those plants. The question is even asked of the Ford plant, how many 10th warders work at the Ford plant? So if we look at what's the return of investment back into our community, we're not seeing an investment. If you look at...
Let me break in. Is there a hospital in the 10th Ward?
There is Trinity nearby, which is not in the 10th Ward.
But it's not in the 10th
No.
Ward. Okay.
So
does it have a trauma center, the one that's close by?
No, there's the nearest trauma center is usually, unfortunately, Christ Hospital.
All the way in Oakland.
All the way
That's
west.
quite far.
Yes.
What about in Indiana?
I'm not aware of one in Indiana. So
let's talk about a couple things
Sure.
first, and I want to get back to economic development. And Don told me he has a couple questions
Okay.
too. So, are you for or against red light cameras?
I oppose the red light cameras and the speed traps.
Are you for or against the speed cameras? Well, same question,
yeah.
I guess, but
Yeah, I'm against that.
cameras.
Yeah, just
now the incumbent alderman,
mhm.
I believe he's been there since 1999.
Correct.
Did he vote for or against the parking meter deal?
He supported the parking meter deal.
The one that lost us $1 million to $6.5 billion.
Yes.
And increases the parking rates and hurts businesses. I
Yes.
think.
hmm
So, are you for an elected school board?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So we got a couple just
Yeah.
yes or no questions
Yeah,
out of the way.
and I just want to speak, I don't know if charter schools are going to come up or not as it relates to Chicago public schools, but one of the things that we're calling for out of our campaign is for a moratorium on the public financing of charter schools. At least $75 million of the CPS budget is going towards the establishment of charter schools.
No, that's not to get rid of current charter schools, not to build more charter schools.
Yes. No funding, no financing of charter schools, period, out of the CPS budget is what we're calling for. We'd rather see that $75
Now,
million.
is that for current schools also, though? Or just you're talking about future schools?
Current schools as well.
Okay.
The key is that $75 million would be greater to invest that money in our local schools, specifically in the areas of music, arts, and sports, which unfortunately a lot of our schools don't have. But they want to build charter schools, or they want to have charter schools, let them go out in the private market and raise the money for that. I don't want to see any more CPS dollars, our taxpayer dollars, going to fund the charter schools.
I was wondering, Rich, what kind of public transportation issues are there in your ward? And as alderman, what would you do about that?
We have Metro, On the southeast side, 83rd Street, 87th Street, 93rd Street stops.
Yes.
And obviously we have the South Shore that goes through Hegewisch.
Right.
And then we do have some buses. We have the Lakeshore Express or South Shore Express, which is a 26. We have the 30 bus. We have a 100 bus, the 95th, for example. But because of where we're located, there are transportation issues. So, for example, if you had to work late or leave real early for work, you'd be in a real bind to access public transportation on the southeast side. So, getting back to your question, what would I do or what can I do? First of all, we know that the funding of our transportation comes from, the federal government and obviously through the state first and foremost. So, my job as an alderman is to lobby both my federal elected officials and my state officials to let them know what are the needs of the constituents of the 10th Ward. Do we need an extra express? Do we need a reroute? It's my job to communicate based upon speaking with our constituents what are the needs of our community to them, to look at how they can get the funding necessary to increase our transportation.
But in general, you need more public transportation. In your ward.
Absolutely, we need more public transportation. But
so different later hours or earlier hours,
or just more. I take the 26, for example, working for the Water Reclamation District. I take the 26th Street bus, which is the Lakeshore Express bus, and the challenge is there. It's just rush hour. It's a rush hour service. There's not enough buses, and usually the ones that they send are the regular sized ones. So we're crammed in there like sardines, getting back and forth to work, which I don't think is fair. Either send more buses for that route in particular, and send the extended buses, so that people are not. I mean, I've been to Japan, I've been to Tokyo, and sometimes I feel like I'm back in Japan because we're just crammed. So many people crammed in on the buses. It obviously becomes a safety issue. So the other thing that as an alderman, what I'm supposed to do, what an alderman should do, is have these discussions with representatives from the Chicago Transit Authority, and to communicate the needs of our people to the CTA board to say this is what we need. But in addition to that, also lobby my federal and state elected officials, say, hey guys, this is what we propose to CTA. These are what our needs are. I need your help to get the funding. That's what an alderman's supposed to do, is go out and identify where the resources are at and bring those resources back into their ward.
Would you support more transparency in how the CTA makes decisions and implements policies?
Absolutely. Transparency and accountability, obviously, in government is necessary. And we'd certainly like to see that not only at the CTA, but all across the board, at City Hall, at CPS, and all of the other governing agencies. That's a must.
What do you think about the current head of the CTA, Forrest Claypool?
Well, I don't really have a personal opinion about him, but obviously the structure in the organization, I have to look at it based upon my ward and look at it from a local issue, and look at the fact that we have a very large geographic ward, one of the largest wards in the city, and the fact of where we're at in proximity to downtown, and the fact that we don't have enough transportation to get our folks back and forth. Now because we don't have a big job market in the 10th Ward, Frank, we've got people traveling up to 2 hours each way to go back and forth to work, either on public transit or driving.
I'm assuming some of them are blue collar, so if they're janitors or bar backs or bartenders or waitresses or maids or whatever else it may be, because you do have a blue collar ward.
Yeah, absolutely.
They may be coming back late at night and need that public transportation or whatever, and if there's no train or a good bus, then they're going to pay either the Uber or a taxi cab, or drive, and then all the added costs there.
Absolutely.
What about the Ventra?
The Ventra card?
Yeah.
Okay, what about it?
Are you for it? Would you support disbanding it?
Well, I use it myself.
I think everybody has to use it.
Yeah, I don't think we have much of a choice unless you want to pay cash. I think that if we can, whatever we can do to make it easier for our citizens to utilize public transportation, the better. So if that means if there has to be some changes to the Venture card to make it easier, then let's explore those issues.
Okay. Because one thing that happened, the rollout at least was bad.
Yes, it
in the
was.
sense that it wasn't working. People would be charged for $50. Some people would be charged for none.
Mm-hmm.
It was reading your card when it was in your pocket. It was really a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, and the other problem is who's making the money. Why was the other system, why wasn't it working?
Oh,
The
yes.
other card. I mean, what's
Yeah.
wrong with it? Why do
Right.
we need system? And then why do people need to get debit cards or credit cards? For on the Ventra when they're paying fees, and it didn't seem like a good consumer.
Well, yeah, there were
sense.
a lot of fees attached to the Ventra
Sure.
system, which you did not have with the older system.
Correct.
And the thing about Ventra is that it's being run not by the RTA itself, but by a private company that is run for profit that is contracted to the RTA. So they're not running it as a public service. They're running it to make profit.
Sure.
And so they're running it in such a way as to try and squeeze as much money out of people as possible.
Sure.
And that includes a lot of fees. For example, you get charged money to your account if you don't use your Ventra card for a while. They start deducting money from you automatically.
Yeah.
And that's just one of several things.
Yeah,
that
and
they
obviously
do.
that's not fair to working
No.
It's absurd.
families at all. Absolutely not. Yeah, those are questions. Obviously, as constituents bring in their needs, it's my job to take those and communicate them to CTA officials, and say this is what 10th warders are experiencing.
What about TIF funds? Do you support a moratorium on TIF? Is there a TIF in is there a TIF or more than one TIF?
Yeah,
in the 10th
there's
ward?
several TIF districts in the 10th ward. In fact, one of them is utilized at least $99 million for the lakeside redevelopment where the old U.S. Steel Southworks plant was at.
And what's supposed to go there in exchange for the old Southworks?
Well, they have grand plans to bring high-end housing, commercial development. They're talking about a marina.
I like the marina idea, but is there a need for high-end housing there?
Well, obviously not.
Yeah.
No, and
There's no market for current 10th ward
absolutely
residents.
not.
So
No.
they're trying to gentrify the 10th ward. then.
Absolutely, and
Push current residents out, make things too
Yes.
high.
yes, absolutely, yeah, and that issue there, lakeside redevelopment. I've been working with the community. The community is pushing for a community benefits agreement on that project. Unfortunately, the current alderman didn't negotiate that on the front end. If I was the alderman, I would have negotiated that on the front end to ensure that local 10th warders benefit from whatever happens there. But that hasn't happened, and so now there's a group of people, coalition, that are trying to force McCaffrey development and force Alderman Pope to the table to say, hey, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs over the next 30 years in construction, and the community needs to benefit from that. And as a grandson of a former steelworker who worked, at that location, I think it's absolutely necessary that, USX, they profited all those years off of the blood, sweat, and tears of our family. And I think it's absolutely necessary that we, local 10th warders and our families, benefit from whatever happens there at that location. But it's only going to benefit us if we can hammer out a community benefits agreement that is binding. Now, they haven't done a whole lot. They've done some of the infrastructure, obviously. But I personally feel that project hasn't taken off because they don't have an anchor. They don't have an economic anchor to build around it. And Frank, you know that the last time I ran 4 years ago, when I got 40% of the vote, one of the things I was pushing for at that lakeside redevelopment was for a private hospital and university complex to be built on that site, to be the economic anchor.
Right. And I know we had been talking, or you had been talking to Christian universities, and I know you're a person of faith,
Yes,
and you
sir.
believe that the faith-based and churches play a role in the community. And
Absolutely.
they do, in fact, but you would encourage that role.
Yeah, absolutely. For that location, there's plenty of entities. I mean, we can go talk to Notre Dame. We can go talk to the Methodists, who have both a university and a hospital complex. There's all kinds of things that we can do, but it's my job as an alderman not to sit and wait for the Department of Planning and Development to put something on my desk to say, oh, somebody wants to come develop in your ward. It's my job to go outside of the ward to whom I need to go speak to bring in the right development, to bring in the right
you had said
developers.
that you had been talking to private hospitals and private
Yes.
universities to anchor the word.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
Okay, what kind of, and I guess this is a little bit of a follow-up to Frank's question, Rich, what kind of economic development would you like to bring into that ward?
Well, it goes back to clean and green.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've been talking about as a community is the establishment of a green industrial economic corridor.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've been talking about as a community is an offshore wind farm project in Lake Calumet, for example. So that's to bring new things to the table, but also we have to deal with some existing issues. We have some of the most contaminated land that has not been remediated in the ward. The old LTV Steel property on Avenue O, for example, the Acme Steel property on Torrance Avenue, for example. All of that land needs to be remediated. We need to be able to, find and allocate the dollars so that we can get that land remediated, so that we can put it back to work.
Okay, what if any of our viewers are interested in supporting you,
Yes.
how can they get in touch to help you out in your campaign?
Sure. Well, the first way they can get in touch with me is obviously via our website, which is www.martinez10.com. We have a campaign office open at 13301 South Brandon in the Hegewisch neighborhood, and our phone number is 773-828-9130. And we're on Facebook. We have our campaign page has a Facebook page, Rich Martinez 10th Ward. Plenty of ways that you can follow us and get involved and help us over the next 40 plus days.
Thank you very much for being on our show. Rich Martinez, candidate for Alderman in the 10th Ward of the City of Chicago. Many good ideas. And thank you to my co-host, Don Richie, for helping me in this interview. And most of all, thank you to our viewing audience. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and God bless you.